Next time I pushed record. Folks, I am basically the MVP of this episode because because I have done the tough task of pushing the record button.
The big red
Anyway,
record button.
yeah, the big red button that says record. So, welcome back everyone to Big Fantasy Energy. I am Jared.
And I am Ashley.
Yay!
Yay!
I was gonna say like something cheesy, like our podcast where we talk about fantasy books.
So you went ahead and did it anyway.
I'm like, but it is true.
It's true.
Anyway, welcome back to our podcast. This is our last installment, sad, of our theme where we are honoring and highlighting indigenous authors. So it is November and it's Indigenous Peoples Month, and this is our last installment where we are covering To Shape a Dragon's Breath by Moniquill Blackgoose. So yeah, it's super exciting. How do you feel like the month has gone for you, like kind of going outside of your comfort zone, both of us really, and like reading some books that used normal for us?
Yeah, I
don't
think
mean
that
not normal because we read a diverse author. We mean the
no.
style of some of the books we've read are different than what we normally read, just to be
But
clear.
then also, to also be clear, focusing on 4 books that are by specifically Indigenous authors, and that for 3 of them really did focus on Indigenous like issues
Themes. Yeah, totally.
and themes, is outside of my norm of what I read. Also, to be perfectly honest, and why we wanted to start this podcast and why we wanted to discuss this theme particularly, especially during November, is that it's hard to find. And the only way authors like this are going to be able to continue to write books and like get them published, especially traditionally, is when people read them and they talk about them. So I think that it was really good. It definitely pushed me out of my comfort zone. I read things that I liked. I read things that I didn't like, and it wasn't that I didn't like the stories. It was just like the style of writing wasn't necessarily for me.
Yeah, totally.
And we get, and like we'll get into that a little bit too. But like with Black Sun, it wasn't that I didn't like the story. It wasn't that I didn't like what it was trying to portray. It's just like the style of writing wasn't for me. But
yeah, I mean, honestly,
also,
regardless of who would have wrote that book, I knew it. Like if a 5'10" white redhead from Oklahoma would have written that book, I would have been like, Ashley's not gonna like this.
Yeah, no.
But you didn't hate it. It was just not your type.
No. And I also will say that like I tend to read for pure escapism. I don't tend to read for something that will make me think critically or make me like I'm looking for an escape. So a couple of these books,
it definitely has to be the right mood, because I loved it, but I think if I would have been in a different mood, I would have not really vibed with that book. So I hear you for sure.
So but how about you?
I think it's been good. I mean, obviously I was really wanting to read Black Sun, so I enjoyed that. I think overall, I think, not just you, but I am a person of color, but I'm, really try to expand my horizons and read different things. So it was a lot of new stories for me, new perspectives. I enjoyed it. I like branching out, and I think I'm thankful to you and to this podcast just to like push myself to read things that are not just like what I would normally gravitate towards. And I think there are definitely some interest I've found from some of the authors that we've read this month that I'm like, oh my God, I want to read them more often. And then there's definitely some that I've been like, don't know if I'll really vibed with certain books. So I think overall it was great. I like that we talked about highlighting, a different scope of books and authors, and we're like staying true to it. And I love that we are. So it's been good.
I will say like there's definitely like 2 of the books that we read for this month, I'll say this. 2 of the books we read, I probably would have DNF'd because they wouldn't have just been my vibe, and I probably would have DNF'd them. And I'm happy that I didn't. One book I probably would never have picked up. Like, I probably wouldn't have ever picked up last month's book just because it was YA.
Oh, right. Totally.
And so that would have been like really the only reason I didn't pick it up. But I'm happy that we read. So like, it also got me to read things that I'm happy that I read. Are they my style? No. Would I probably reread them, or would I go on in the series? No. But I'm happy that I read them.
That's kind of how I feel about.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel about The Witch's King. Like
Yeah.
The Witch King. Sorry, The Witch King. Our last episode, I wouldn't have probably read it just because it is YA, but I'm glad I did read it. I liked it and I enjoyed it. So
yeah. So yeah. So moving into the summary for To Shape a Dragon's Breath.
Ooh.
And I will also say I just finished reading this book right before we started recording. You're
pulling a Jared.
Yeah. I will also probably mispronounce so many things, even though I listened to some of this book on audiobook so I could get names right. I'm horrible at pronunciation, so I am very sorry if I mispronounce things.
So just to like preface the episode, I will not correct Ashley unless she asks me, because I will mess up names as well.
Yeah.
But we might refer to the same people and pronounce it differently, just like FYI.
Yeah.
So that could very likely happen.
So this book, while it is in the adult fantasy section, follows Anequs, who is a 14-year-old Makapwag girl.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. So she one day was on her island. There is a map at the beginning of this book, and it is basically the world as the map is this world.
I hate the map, by the way. I was like, what a waste, because it's just too big. I'm like, this isn't helpful.
It's also the whole entire world.
I was like, bitch, are we globetrotting up in here?
Yeah.
I was like, okay.
And so this girl, Anequs, is on an island that is inhabited by what I'm going to use like the Macapagal Est people. But in terms of like, they don't use the term indigenous, they use the term Naki, which sometimes, based on how it's used in the book, it felt a little slurish.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Sometimes it didn't. I am unsure. I feel slightly uncomfortable saying it, so it makes me think it's a little slurish. But that could also purely be my own connotations being added to it. But she's her community is an indigenous community on the island, and there's about 1,000 of them. And one day she's doing her daily chores, and she sees what is considered to have been gone for hundreds of years, since the Great Death in their community, and it's a dragon. This world has dragons, which is great. The next day, her mother tells her to go and take tobacco and other things up to their calling it a temple or a shrine doesn't feel quite like the right word, but it is what it kind of is. And once she's up there, she finds a dragon egg. The customs of her people call for dancing and storytelling for the whole community, and when the dragon hatches, the dragon picks their person. So a couple months go by, they're all spending a lot of time singing, dancing, storytelling to this dragon egg, and the dragon hatches. The dragon picks Anequs as its person, and the dragon's name is Casaqua. Soon it is determined pretty quickly that this dragon, while basically puppy-sized, has dangerous tendencies from its own nature, and Anequs is concerned that she's not going to be able to keep her dragon or her people safe without some learning and some schooling. So her brother, who lives with the English. Yeah, with the English people. Yeah, the white people. He says that there's a school. These dragons have to be registered. If she doesn't register, the English could come to their island, and bad things would happen, because nothing ever good happens when the English come.
Shocker.
We know this.
No
So
way.
in order to keep her people safe, and she also knows she needs to learn how to care for this dragon, needs to know how to help her people, she decides that she's going to enroll in this school for dragons. There, from basically the very beginning, she runs into lots of issues, lots of cultural differences, lots of racism, just overall, lots of shit happens. She makes a couple of really good friends, a couple of like acquaintances. But things really start spiraling, and people are not happy that Anequs and the other indigenous, Theode is
Yeah.
there at the school, and they're allowed to have dragons. Never mind that dragons choose their people. So it makes no
Right.
sense to me, but
Yeah.
basically just racism comes into play, and
Totally. Yeah.
people don't like it. And Anequs is sent there. She's learning, and she needs to learn what she needs to learn. She needs to learn how to do all these things to help her people, but can she do it without losing herself or losing her life? Because these are like some serious times here. So overall, to jump into my review, I rated this book 3 stars. I gave it 1 star and spice because there's a little bit of kissing, and there's not like sexual stuff, but there's enough talk about the like dating culture and
It's
stuff
like a
like
low
that.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, a
Like a
very low
very
one.
low, like,
But
yeah, it registers. It's like
but
a blip, but you have to like,
yeah.
you have to put it because if you put 0, that means nothing's in there.
Yeah. So, yeah. But this book
Also,
overall to me,
me while I'm pouring wine.
you're fine. Do it, girl.
Continue.
This book was like, it was more like snapshot of life, like very day in the life. Like it was watch and like what's like move. Like the plot isn't moving. It's like her just moving through her day. I wouldn't even say it's character driven because it's not like she's choosing to do things. It's just
Yeah.
her moving through her day. And like, yeah, we have time jumps and things like that, but like it's still just kind of her moving through her day. Like, yeah, there are things happening, but it's not like plot driven. So it's also set in what's basically Victorian times. It focuses mainly on the different stories and cultures between all these people. Not not really my kind of book. I found myself overall really not care. I feel like we focused a lot less on the indigenous cultures and much more on the English culture, which I really didn't give two flying fucks about.
I
And
agree. It was just like kind
we
of boring.
yeah, and we focused on that a lot more. Like it was a lot of like Anequus like learning about the English culture, and that wasn't interesting to me because that is the predominant culture of the United States. I
Yeah.
mean, like, mind you, it was like Viking-esque. It was like I also thought that the world building was a little lazy because it was trying to be like a fantasy world, but it was basically just Viking, and like instead of being English, it was English. Instead of being uh like all the names just of like the different cities and like things like that were like or cultures and like countries were just like Viking cultures, but with like an extra letter added to them. So it felt a little lazy to me in terms of like the English side of it. I was so much more interested in the indigenous stuff, and we got like none of it. And that just really like I just wasn't super into that. But I get it.
You're gonna laugh
I
when
like
I give my review because we are very like aligned. But anyway, keep going.
yeah. So I liked the representation. There's an open fluidity of Anequus that is just very common in indigenous cultures, period, of like gender is not like no one really cares about gender. Love is love. Like don't give two flying fucks. I also really liked the autism representation in Sander. I felt like it was like how he was treated is very true to how one would have probably been treated during Victorian times, and two is oftentimes treated today. I liked I liked the portrayal of the good English trying to help the indigenous people, but Anequs constantly being like, "Who asked you? Like, we
She's like,
don't like
no,
we're here to save you. We're here to help you. We're help to like bring you out of yourself," which is so true for how it was. Like, we're here to help you out of your. Who asked you?
yeah, we
Like,
don't need your motherfucking help, bitch.
we didn't want any of this. We're happy as we are, and we don't need to be a part of this. So I liked that. This book made me uncomfortable at times, which as a white woman in America, it should. And I appreciated that. I felt like the plot was really slow. Like the story was really slow at times. The first 30% was so slow, so slow.
Brutal.
I was just like, dear God, get me through
Brutal.
this. The
Yeah.
middle 40% was okay. It started picking up a little bit more. I started getting more interested. And the last 30% was decently fast and much more interesting. But I probably won't read on because I don't think I can, like, I don't think the pacing is going to be it for me. And I don't think I care enough about any of the characters. Because we were kind of talking about it last time. I think that they're good character. Like the main character, I like her a lot. I thought she was interesting. But most of the other characters, other than Sander, I did like Sander a lot.
I love Sander, but the rest were
Yeah,
really flat.
yeah, I agree. They
Yeah.
were very two-dimensional. I felt like Theod could have been interesting, but
Could have been so interesting, but he was not.
Every time he got slightly interesting, it was like we had to pull him back, and
Or we had
that
to
was
go through fucking
irritating to me.
chemistry class again, but
Yeah.
I'll talk about that in my review.
Yeah, and the dragons were really disappointing too. Like the dragons were really disappointing. Like, yeah, they were there, but they were basically just glorified puppies.
Yeah, and they didn't do any. I maybe
They
this.
didn't do
I mean,
anything.
obviously, this is a series, so like we'll
Yeah.
see. But anyway, yeah.
It's like the second one hasn't even come out yet, but this one is like, mind you, they're like her dragon is still very little. It's like at the beginning, based on what they were saying, like right when it hatched, I assumed it was like Belinda size, which is like 20 pounds. I assumed it was very like Belinda size. And then by the end of it, I assumed it was like more like Ari size. That's
like
that's
a
kind of where
big
my
dog. Yeah, with wings.
That's kind of where my brain was. But with all of that, I still just like don't think that like they weren't in it very much. Yeah, they had the emotional, but like the book wasn't about dragons. Obviously the book was about the social and colonialism and stuff like that, which is absolutely fine.
Which I also thought. I mean, I agree with you. I think that's what the author wanted it to be about, but I don't think that it was very for me. Well, let you finish, and then I'll get into mine.
Yeah.
But I
Well,
agree with you, but
that's pretty much the end of mine. That's pretty much the end.
Yeah.
Because I was just like, I think that like the book wasn't. It was about the dragons, and it was about her learning how to like care for her family because of the dragons. But like, it wasn't about the dragons. It was more about her finding a way to help her family.
Right. I agree with literally everything that you said. Like literally everything that you said. So
yeah.
My only thing is like the motives behind things is a little like I'm just curious because this is like speculation. But anyway, so I was really looking forward to this book because I had heard really good things about it, and
Me too.
will start the book. I will start my review off by like kind of going backwards, and I'll say that I am going to continue on, but because I'm hopeful that the pace will not replicate, because if it is, but I will like confidently say if I'm halfway through the second book and it's very similar as far as like the issues I had with the first book and pacing, that I definitely I'll probably just like DNF it. But anyway, I gave it 3 stars and 1 spice. I give it like half a spice, but I was like, yeah, it's like half a spice to 1. But
that's like I was originally going to give it half a spice. So I was like, that's not really on our scale. I'll give it a 1.
Yeah, totally. Which it's not, right? So I'll give it a 1. But I thought the writing was beautiful. I thought the world building to me was okay. So I was laughing when you were talking because I thought the world building specifically, it was so, and maybe it was lazy towards the English because it was so similar to like
Our world.
our worlds, and maybe that's why she didn't really put much work into it. But I did feel like it was like kind of, I just put like meh, is what I put.
Mhm.
But I thought the world building of the indigenous world was amazing, and I just like wanted more, more, more. Like I
Agreed.
say, and it challenged me because I will say I did get a little bogged down by all the names, and it was hard. Like
Yeah.
but it was like not in a way of like I'm seeing my privilege. I'm seeing that I don't know about these things, and I'm like I kept reading because I really wanted to like make a good effort of trying to conceptualize and understand because I was getting not frustrated, but I was just getting really confused because the names were hard for me and like a lot of the names sounded similar. So I was like, wait, is
Hold
this
on. Really
go
quick.
for it?
Look.
Yeah, go for it.
In the book, pronunciation guide,
I
page 1,
know.
page 2, 3, page 4.
Which I'm gonna throw shade at Ashley, which I will say the main character's name is Anequs, so I do know that
Yeah.
one. And then I think she said Kasakwa correctly based on the thing, but it's crazy to have
Yeah.
4 pages of pronunciations. Like Ashley and I will talk about like in a fantasy world, it's really tough when there's like Black Sun, for example,
Yeah.
4
That
pages
one
of
had
like
a
a
lot of
glossary, but it had
that
like
one had a lot too.
had a definition
Yeah.
of what the things were. But this one, I kind of wish that they would have had the pronunciation and the definition because it didn't really help me to know how to pronounce it, but then not know. Like I was like, well, what the fuck is this? I can't remember, right? So
Yeah.
anyway, it was tough. But I will say I challenged myself to like really. I was like, okay, like put the names aside. Like you're just not used to like, like typical Americanized names. Like everyone's not Mary, Smith, John, Harry, like
Ashley.
Ashley, Jarrett, you know what I mean? So I didn't mind that. I just thought it was like I had to wrap my head around, okay, I'm gonna have to like put some intellectual effort into like knowing who these people are and like telling people apart and knowing what
Yeah.
because the land that she was from was hard for me and then like the term that they call people who are bonded to dragons that sounded like the city, I'm pretty sure, or something. It was just it was there was just parts that were confusing because of the language, and that's not
Yeah.
anything wrong with like me not being used to reading this type of stuff, right? So I think
Yeah.
if indigenous names are used more, I think it's great. I loved that part. So it was definitely a challenge, but it was a challenge I was like, I don't know, I was just kind of like glad we were putting ourselves in that
Mhm.
situation to like try. It dives into colonialism, obviously, and the culture like
Obviously.
suppression of like, hey, you can't be who you are, which I really like resonated with because it, I'm Samoan for our listeners,
Mhm.
and my parents, my mom's white, my dad's Samoan, and he immigrated to Hawaii when he was young, and it's like very similar to Hawaiian and Polynesian culture. Is like white missionaries came over, they suppressed the culture of Polynesians or Hawaiians living there. They couldn't speak the language, they couldn't participate in any of the cultural things, and then like they helped them, right?
Yeah.
So it's like I
Yep.
saw a lot of parallels, which is happens in a lot of indigenous cultures. So I just thought I enjoyed like seeing that in a book and represented in a book. Um, I love anything dragons, and I thought Anequs was like a very likable character. Similar to Ashley, I thought the dragons were kind of like a womp womp moment. Like
Yeah.
maybe in the future they'll be a huge part of it. I hope they are because the thing that I thought was a little bit like was how big of a deal the dragons are in this world, which the author makes us
Mhm.
realize, but then how little of a deal they played in the story. So it was like
Yeah.
all everybody cares about is who has dragons and dragons. But then I was kind of like, they're kind of fucking lame.
Yeah.
Like how they're using the story. But obviously they're at a school, but still it was just like it was a
It ain't no
slow.
fourth wing, even at the school. In
Bitch,
fourth
you're
wing,
right. You're
yeah.
right. And also, I think we talked about this. We love the Halfling Saga, which is a book
Yeah.
that we've talked about. Also, right? Isn't she
Yeah.
indigenous, Melissa Blair?
Yes, she
But
is.
also
She's
indigenous. We didn't
indigenous.
highlight her in the Indigenous Peoples Month
Because we were
podcast,
too
but
excited
we
to
were too
talk
excited
about
because we
it.
loved her. But I will say in that first book, I had very similar issues with the pacing. So I
Yeah.
thought this book was like info motherfucking dump. Girl, it was like
Mhm.
all this information overload. And I just thought it was slow and I didn't really care
Yeah.
for the pacing. But different from the Halfling Saga, which we've read before. We always talk about this book, so I
We
feel like we're
do. We
always
really
plugging
like
Melissa
it.
Blair. Like we really are always like we're waiting for that fourth one. But
Comes out
anyway,
soon.
it does. So, but I cared. I was more invested in the characters and like how Ashley said,
Yeah.
some of the characters are kind of. I just thought the characters are flatter and they didn't have as much depth. So when they're info dumping and when the pacing is bad and it's a little slow, in the Halfling Saga, I was like, but I really love these characters. And in this one, I really liked Anequs,
Yeah.
but I didn't really get to know her in a way that made me love her, right? Like I was just
Yeah.
kind of like, I really like her. I enjoy her character and I think
Mhm.
she's a interesting character. But anyway, I thought she was brave, like this young, she's like 15, I think, right? Like she's like 15 or something.
She starts off the book at 14 and then she has a
14.
birthday and she's 15 by the time she's
Yeah.
at school.
Okay, yeah. So she's like 15 and like this young indigenous girl is like leaving her home and like going, you know, to this foreign land. Like just like all of the implications of what that would take to be an indigenous person living in a very different culture and being young and a woman and you're just like moving. I thought she was super brave and I loved that part of it. But it was just like I said, I thought the pacing was slow and I thought it was like info jumping a lot. I
Yep.
loved hearing about her culture. I liked the idea of the school, the story, but like, girl, I do not want to fucking sit through chemistry class. Like, it was a lot for me, and I was kind of like, the amount of the times they talked about the elements or like their version of the elements, I was kind of like, and maybe this
They
book's not
had
for
a
me.
periodic table underneath
Right,
the map.
right. And
So,
it was kind of like, I don't give a flying fuck about this.
no.
Like, and it was just
No.
too much. And the amount of how depth they went, like you said, it was just kind of like they were going through like a day in the life, but it was like her full fucking school day. Like
Yeah.
I was like,
I ate lunch and then I went
yeah,
to class
class,
and then I
and then
ate
I went to
dinner
class,
and
and
then
then I
I
walked in
yeah.
the hallway. I was kind of like, girl, what is going on? So
Yeah.
it was like a 500-page book. I mean, actually,
Yeah.
you know what? Let me check how long it is.
It
Wait, do
was
you have it?
500 and it was 515 on the ebook. This
Yeah. So the
one
physical copy is 500 and
5. No,
yeah,
7.
yeah.
9. Sorry. I'm
And
gonna keep going. Wait,
so,
hold on.
yeah, well, just like Ashley's showing you, it's too long, right? She's like,
511.
let's
Yeah.
see, 511, right? So she jumped up. So I thought it was like genuinely like 150 pages too long. Like
I thought it was
I
like
think
200 pages too
yeah,
long.
I think yeah, I mean I wouldn't argue with that either. If it was 200 if it was like a 350-page book and they cut
Yeah.
out a lot of the extra shit, I think this book for me and maybe not Ashley, maybe for Ashley, she would have enjoyed it more. But
I
I
would
could
have enjoyed it
definitely
more.
see the elements of this book being a 4-star for me because, and I think you know this to be true,
Yeah.
Ashley, is like it's very much like my vibe. It's like
Yeah.
political intrigue, historical fantasy, all things I love. But it was just the way she wrote it, it was just a little boring to me. Like I'm like,
Agreed.
girl, like
I
move
I would have
along, please.
yeah, if they had cut out like 200
Wait,
pages and
sorry, is
cut out
Moniquill a woman? I don't even know. I didn't
yeah.
look. Okay, sorry.
Uh
Just like we will.
let
I
me
don't want
double
to.
check. Let me double check their
Yeah, I want to make sure I'm like referring to them correctly.
she. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I
She her. So
I, w-
I
I wanted to
agree
love this
with
so
you.
bad, but
Yeah.
it was like a flat 3 for me. Like I'm gonna read on because it, like you
Yeah.
said, the last 30% got better.
Yeah.
I liked Sander, the autist, like the one who like gives autistic
Yeah.
tendencies. He's neurodiverse. The thing I loved most about this book was Anequs's like unflappable, just like acceptance of everyone. Like I just
Yeah.
loved that, and they allude to like that being it's because of how she was raised. But even in that type of culture, if you're raised to love everyone and accept everyone, not everyone turns out that way, right?
Yeah.
And I thought
Agreed.
she was just so like whether they were queer, whether they were a different class, whether they were maids, whether they were neurodiverse, whether it was a poly relationship, like
Yep.
she was just so like I loved that about her, and I loved the author for bringing a character who's like the main character who is just so accepting, and I
Yeah.
really and it didn't feel like forced or unreasonable, because a lot of times when you point this, like, she didn't seem like I'm better than everyone else, like I'm so ethical and wonderful and my moral compass is so great. She seemed really relatable to me, and I really
Mhm.
enjoyed her, especially for like a 15-year-old
Yeah.
girl. I thought she was wise
Yeah.
beyond her years. But yeah, the
If
book was motherfucking slow for me at points,
yeah,
and
if
I
they had
hate
cut out like
those.
yeah, if you had said like you said, like if they cut out like 200 pages and a lot of it was like the school stuff, I probably would have liked the book a lot more. I also wish there was just a little bit with that, I think if they had just had like a little bit more of like the plot points from like the end of the book kind of in the
Yeah,
beginning, like just to
totally.
kind of carry it through and keep me like, well, what's gonna happen? And
Well,
like
even like you said,
and
like, go ahead.
in a not passive way. Like it's kind of there
Yeah.
in the beginning in a passive way,
Mhm.
but like
Well, even
I
like
don't need it to be passive.
totally, and even like you have Ivar, who's like this asshole, and his dad is like in the. I'm gonna say this wrong, but he's like in the government, right? Like his
Yeah,
dad is. He's like
he's the Jarl.
something, right? But yeah, that sounds right. But like he's like the villain sort of, but that puts some depth to the story. But he's like he pops off on her, and he's an asshole, like a total, like a really really good villain, I think. In his first
And
little
he's never seen again.
like his little monologue of like demeaning women and people of color,
Yeah,
everything, I was like, fuck this guy.
yeah.
I hope I hope they just like I hope she brings it to
To
him.
bring it back to Fourth Wing, he's the Jack Barlow.
Worse. Like he could have been so much
Worst.
worse, but at least Jack Barlow's in the story. Ivar,
Exactly.
Ivar like has a moment, and then it's just, to me, if the story in the second book, and I don't know how many books this is going to be. I think it, but
Mm.
anyway, if in the series, if I need to know that amount of chemistry to understand, or it's that important to the plot, then it's going to be one of two things. Either I'm not going to like the book because why do
Yeah.
I need to know that much? Or two, it's not that important. I'm going to like the book a lot. And then that just shows that you could have cut out a ton of shit from the first book, because we actually don't need to know that much about
Yeah.
her day to day, the subject
Similar.
matter. I really, really liked, what was his name? Professor Ulfar, the one
Yeah.
who's in the wheelchair. I thought he was so cool. Like
Yeah.
like that relationship could have been built more. I do think you and I both like Sander because I loved seeing like a neurodiverse character on the page,
Mhm.
but also they kind of did talk about him more, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
because they talked about him more, we both liked him more because
Yeah.
that relationship was built with her,
Yeah.
with him and Anequs. But
Well,
with like her attraction towards Theod was kind of like, he's just, I just don't know. I just didn't get his character. So I was kind of like,
yeah.
I'd rather her be with what's her face, Liberty, the maid.
Yeah.
But
Well,
anyway,
she yeah.
that's my
So,
review. 3 stars, 1 spice. Let's get into spoilers, shall we?
yes, spoilers.
Okay.
So to just back off of what you were just saying, like,
Yeah,
yeah, she's
sorry.
into, like,
I was
yeah,
like
no,
off
she's
a
into,
tangent.
no. But like, I was like, I don't want to say it until the spoiler section, so I'm gonna keep going now. But like, yeah, like Theo, she has that, like, they're like kind of building that relationship of like she wants to kind of show him his own culture, but then you have Liberty, who is like the maid, and she's also black, and I
Love
love
Liberty.
that. Liberty is great. Well, once again, we don't see her super often on page either, but then Anequs is like, she's like, in my culture, I can be with both of you.
Which
So
I loved. Like,
love.
I thought that was so cool. Like it was like not
Yeah.
even like a second thing. It was like not only that, I will say like props to this author, because not only did they talk about being like poly, it was like the
Mm-hmm.
way she described the depth of like how people would respond to someone saying they wanted to
Yeah.
be, like, I thought it was so mature, and it was written in such a way that was like
But that's,
I'm not in a poly relationship.
yeah.
I've never been in one, but I feel like the way they explained it was just in a way that made it seem like so logical. Like, of course, like
Yeah.
they're mature humans and they're like, oh, I make you happy. This person would also make you happy. Okay, let's try
Yeah.
it. And I kind of loved the introduction
Agreed.
of being in a poly relationship and how this 15-year-old is like, oh, you can like both. I was like,
Yeah. Well,
that's so cool.
this 15-year-old, because of the culture that she was raised in, and like we were saying at the beginning, it was just people are people, love is love. I don't give two flying fucks who you identify as. I don't care. I
Right.
don't give two flying fucks who you love.
Yeah.
Are you happy? Is it hurting me? No?
Which
Cool.
is
Let's
so
move
sad.
on.
It's so, so sad that like that is not like the way people who we know, hello, it's like for those of you who are watching, we're literally filming this on election day.
So we're gonna cry a little bit
In
after this.
America. We're literally filming this on election day in America. So the fact that there are people in this book, even though we didn't like love this book, but the characters who were just like, hey, if it doesn't hurt me, then let people be.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's such a simple concept. And unfortunately,
People
in
just
this world,
they can't handle it.
the English in this world, or in our
Yeah.
world, you know, many people
The
just
English that coincides with anyone who has the
the
heritage.
English or the English. Yeah, I mean, it was just, yeah, I think it was interesting. I did like Liberty. I do think, I just thought the characters, like, I wanted more. And I think because there was so much information that the author tried to share with us, that it didn't
Hmm.
allow her, because if she would have given us more backstory on these characters, it would have been fucking 700 pages.
Yeah.
And that's not realistic. So you gotta give, I would have been fine with 500 pages if she cut out a lot of the info dumping and a lot of like the monotonous, like, telling us.
I I could have done without a lot of. I think that the professor that was teaching, like, I'm calling them sigils because I can't think of the actual word. They're basically sigils. The chemistry shit. It was important to have him because he's so staunchly against the indigenous people being there. Like, I think it's
Oh,
important to have
Izell.
him.
I think it's Professor Izell. I
Yeah,
think
but I also think that we could have done a lot less of
because
like
they
the
call him
classes
chemistry,
overall.
like, skill to craft, right? Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
is that what?
yeah.
Yeah. It's
Yeah, something
Professor
like
Izell.
that. It's like them learning how to draw sigils, basically, to get their
Yeah.
dragons to do stuff to shape the dragon's breath.
Which
Um,
that was super fascinating, by the way. That's
yeah,
something
but
totally
we got
like.
like none of actually when they did the final exam, and they like she did the written. We got a detailed explanation of her taking the written exam, and then they're like, and now on to the practical, and it was 2 sentences.
Okay, literally, bitch. I was sitting there like, you're gonna tell me, like, not, this isn't what happened, right? Like, we're in the spoiler section, it's fine.
Yeah,
But basically, like, you're gonna tell me how she fucking circled C on a fucking Scantron, but you're not gonna sit here and go into detail about the things that are more interesting. That
I
brings
was
me to
like,
my, you know
she
what?
was
Brings me to
actually
my next
like
point.
through all of that, she was at that point. I was like, wait, she's actually doing these things with her dragon. We have never
Right.
seen that.
Yeah, which we would have loved to see, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
And I think too
What
is
was
like
your next point?
oh my God. I I hope this is in the second book, but I'm telling you, there are so many parts of this book that I loved that I was like, that, give me more of that. When she realizes, I thought, which I didn't know this was the case, and I was like, it was like an aha moment to me, and I loved it, and it like ties so many things into like indigenous cultures, not just like as far as like North America or the Americas, but just like in general, how important dance is, and
Yeah.
how important, different types of dance speak to the sky and other elements. So
Mm-hmm.
when you realize that the sigils that they're writing are actually can be done by movement from a group of people performing a ritual or a dance, because
Yeah.
dragons can see that from flying overhead, and
Yeah.
see like the visual I had from that was so like almost like not emotional, but I was just like, that is so
I
cool.
love that.
I loved
And
it. And
I
then they
wanted,
just didn't give us any more of it. That's why I was like, bitch, if we go back to this, and you know what? And maybe it's because she has to go to this English school and learn the way that the English want her to learn. Fair. But for
Yeah.
me as a reader, I was just like, I was like
But
greedy. I wanted to know
she's
more about the other situation and less about, like, I'm like, I don't give
yeah.
a fuck about this fucking bullshit ass school.
No.
I love the two. I mean, I not love. That's a strong word. I liked the two, secret lesbians. The two secret lesbians, like, cool. But I just thought like the things I wanted more of, I didn't get. The things I didn't really care for, I got a lot of. And I thought I
I
gave it a 3 still because I liked the idea of the book and I liked themes of the book, but I didn't. There were so many things. I think it could have easily been a high 4 for me if it was just a
yeah.
little different.
Well, and like I agree with that completely because I also feel like with the like dancing / sigils, and once again, we're using the word sigil because I can't think of the actual word they used, and it started with an S, and I think it had a K in there. I can't remember what the
Skill to
actual word
craft.
is.
Yeah, it's skill to craft.
Well, no, like yeah, that's the name of the overall, but like they have like a name for like the actual individual thingies.
Oh yeah, you're right. I can't. I haven't. I mean, I
And I
haven't
think
paid
it was
attention, so I can't.
Strida, Strida,
Maybe.
but
No.
that's what's right
Yeah.
underneath skill to craft. So I'm gonna go with that. But
Yeah.
but the fact that like the dancing for her culture was that, but then the thing that got me was I was like, and I kept asking myself this question, like even during her chemistry classes, the skill to craft lessons, I was like, but explain to me, like you've given me 5 chapters on giving me these English mythology lessons. And I don't get any answer into how these little doodle drawing circle things the dragon uses it in order to
Right.
do the magic. I was like, I don't understand this.
And what annoys
This
me too
thing
is
that's
that means that we're going to learn about it. Either they're going to brush over it and just ramp it right up to a fast pace, or we're going to have to fucking sit there and learn about it in the second book, how it
I
works or how they use it. I'm like, I know you
well,
won't probably read the second book, but I
no,
want to
I mean,
read
like
it.
we'll
So I'm like,
see. I want to, but I'm like I was interested enough in it, and especially at the end. But I just don't know because I was like, if I have to read, I started skipping those chapters because I was like, it's mythology I already know. It's Norse mythology. I
but
don't need a
not
whole
not
chapter.
even just the mythology for me. It was more of like, just in general, like you're so right. But in general, I thought there was so much time where she literally was, it almost felt like she was like, this sounds so bad, and I hate to say this about this
Yeah,
author because I did rate it a 3 books. 3, sorry.
yeah.
3 star. 3 books. I gave it 3 books. No, I gave it, but I gave it 3 stars, and I am planning on reading on. But I genuinely thought sometimes I was reading like a class assigned book. Like, I was
Yeah,
like, girl, I feel like there are literally parts of the majority of some chapters, I felt like I was literally reading like a class assigned. Like, I'm like, this isn't fun for me. Like, what is going on? And you could have,
well,
and if that much is important, then I'm like, I don't know if this is going to be the book for me. So,
and here's the thing: is that this book won quite a bit of
so many
pretty,
awards.
so many awards of like pretty like fiction and like those books that you would get as a class assignment kind of awards. So,
Fair shade. Yeah. Yeah, totally.
so, and not to say like it didn't win like other awards, but it won a lot of awards for like those kind of like it won like an NPR award and stuff like that. Like those are the kind of books that you get as a class assignment.
Right. And I can see why. I think,
Yeah,
I mean, the thing is, though, at the end of the day,
I
like
could
I
definitely.
loved the themes in this, and I wish the themes were more of a focus as opposed to like, it's to me, it's just a simple like case of, and you've read way more than I do, and you are way better at speaking to this, but I feel like it just needed another edit. Like,
Agreed.
it just needed, like, if it had another edit of like, this is it, like, girl, we don't need this.
But here's the thing is that like we want another edit because we are not the intended readers of this book.
Maybe who are the intended readers,
Because
and that's not to be
we're
judgmental.
no. I'm saying we're not the intended readers of this book
Oh, look,
because
we both have it. We're like,
I'm saying we're not the intended readers of this book because this book isn't necessarily for us in terms of like it's not the kind of book we like to read.
but it kind of is, like, on paper, it is the kind of book, not you, but I like to
Yeah,
read. Political intrigue, historical fantasy. I thought it was going to be right up my motherfucking alley, but
yeah.
there's just
But
not
this is
enough
like the kind
emotional
of book that
connection.
I would see. This is the kind of book that I would 100% could have seen me getting assigned in school to like discuss the breakdowns of
No,
indigenous
you're right.
culture. Yeah. This
No,
is
you're right.
100% the book that
And
I would see
to
them giving me.
to that point, I do hope that schools do read this book
Yeah.
because there are a lot of books I read in school that were like very Eurocentric, like very
Mm-hmm.
focused on other themes, and I think there are a lot of themes in this that you could dissect, like in an AP English class with a
Oh, I'm talking
typical.
about my college program, but
Oh,
still,
fair,
yeah.
fair. But
But
even
like
then,
high school potentially too.
yeah,
But
I could see like
yeah,
an AP English teacher who's super progressive being like, "Hey,
yeah,
we're going to read *To Shape a Dragon's Breath* and we're going to talk about colonialism and
yeah,
racism in whatever,"
yeah.
which is great, but it wasn't. It just was missing a few things. But I
I
also
agree.
I think it's very simple, but I thought the you know what? That just makes me think about something. I'm thinking about the cover and how I think the cover's pretty. But
It is really pretty.
I also feel like this book could be a great and beautiful, gorgeous special edition. Like if any of the big companies make it
You're
into a special
addicted.
edition, I'm like, they're gonna make that shit can be pretty as fuck. Like um,
Yeah,
indigenous culture, there's dragons. Like they could, if the right company picks up
yeah,
this as a special edition, it could be. I will be buying it simply for the way it'll look alone.
yeah. I think that like the other thing though is that like this came out last year. I bought it when it came out. It's been sitting on my shelf since then because it made me nervous because I was like, I want to really like this. It
Yeah.
sounds really good, but I have a feeling it's going to be a little too, and this is gonna, I hate this term, but it's gonna be a little too highbrow for me. Like I was like, it's gonna try to make me think too much, and that's not what I read for. So I kept putting it off. And once again, I'm very happy that we read it.
Yeah.
But I don't think this this got super high accolades from all the like once again like NPR and like the people who like to do once again the like the hoity-toity kind of like writing, and this book is definitely one if you want to think deeper, if you want to like feel uncomfortable, if you want to take a look at colonialism, if you want to take a look at racism and really like dig into it a little bit. I think that this
I
book
think
does a
so
good
too, but
job,
also it's a
but it's
YA
not
book.
going it's not
Like
YA.
it's not? I totally
No.
read. Okay, that's shocking to me. I mean, I'm like literally sitting here shocked. I thought it was YA. It
It's not YA. It's in the adult fantasy section. This is not YA.
No, book 1 should be YA, bitch.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying is like it gave YA,
I
but then like trying to be like super intellectual, and I was like, I'm so confused. It's like,
it's
whoa,
absolutely not YA. Yeah.
that's crazy. Okay, well,
Yeah.
interesting. Well,
Um
anyway,
but
but
I
the
think
last
that
thing I have to say before, and then if you
yeah.
have anything, the last thought I just thought, and it brings like I feel like you always spur thoughts in me, so I just like that's why I love talking to you about books. Is when you talked about the dragons, kind of like similar to the thing we're talking about, is like give us more of certain things and less of others. Is you were saying how kind of like meh the dragons were, like we both were like it just wasn't. What's crazy is they spend so much time talking about it's just info dumping. They explain all the breeds of the dragons. They want us to know all these different breeds, and like they talk about this breed does this breed does this. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, cool. Well, I'm not in a fucking biology class, bitch. Give me the action. And maybe that's what she wanted to do.
Yeah.
But I'm like, you're telling me these definitions of, telling me all of this information about all these dragons, and then they don't do a motherfucking thing. You're telling
And
me
I
all of this chemistry, and then we don't do a motherfucking thing about it. So perhaps this is just a slow book, and the second and third books will really pick up. I'm hoping.
maybe I think
We'll
that like
see. That's like my
this is
last
yeah, I think that
thought
this is
about
like
it.
written to be much more literary. So this book I could very easily see being in like the literary fiction section of a bookstore, like pretty easily because it's written very lyrically. It's written very like prose forward, and so there is a lot more show or tell than show. And I think that's like overall thinking about the entire theme that we've had this month, and even thinking about once again going back to the Halfling Saga and Melissa Blair and the that series, the Halfling Saga. For me, of those like the 3 books of the Halfling Saga and the 4 books we've read here, the Halfling Saga is my favorite because it has the same themes of what I think we see in To Shape a Dragon's Breath and Black Sun. Like, it has similar themes, but it's written in a way that's digestible for someone like me who wants action forward and who wants more fantasy. It's written more for that. And so that's why I think I really connected with that series. And we've talked about this, I think, in this episode, and we talked about it in text, is that, like, the first bit of Halfling Saga is also that very slow kind of information dump. And so I almost wonder, is it like a cultural, like, storytelling aspect of, like, let me give you this information because you need to know this? Because I feel like it's been a situation in all of these stories, except for
maybe
the
because
one I'll say, the one I'll say that doesn't do that is A Touch of Darkness, but that's a completely different beast in and of itself.
Oh, totally. And it's like, Greek mythology, Or maybe it's because the world is so unique in ways, or they feel like it's so off the traditional path of, like, what people normally read, that they feel the need to, like, kind of info dump, because it's like, well, I want to make sure people understand the concept. I don't know. I
don't know either.
I mean, and obviously we have different views on Black Sun, but, like, I think it's just, I agree with you as far as there was enough action, even though the first half of the first half of A Broken Blade was a little slow. It did, like, pick up, and there was still a lot of, like, action forward things.
Even in that first half, even though it was slower, there was still, like, action bits.
It was like info dumping while things were happening, and I feel like this was kind of like info dumping while she was in school.
But
I think, it is what it is. I mean, we say this, like, I don't want to. There were a lot of things I did like about this book.
I did too.
And I personally will be rereading it. And we both rated it 3 stars, so I think there's definitely people who will really enjoy it.
Rereading it or reading on? You said rereading.
Sorry,
I think you meant reading on.
I will
you
not.
Don't reread.
I don't reread. So I do not. I rarely. There are like 4 books I've reread in my entire life. This will not be one of them. But I will continue. Good catch. I will continue to read this series, and I look forward to it because I am hopeful, because it got so much out of the way. This specific book, I think, is really great for some people. It just wasn't. I didn't love it. I liked it, and and this is the end. This is the end of our theme for Indigenous Peoples Month, highlighting Indigenous authors. And I just want to, like, give a shout out to Ashley, because we talk about themes and different things, and which she is very open about, like, our cis white hetero woman on our podcast. She's the one who thought about this. It wasn't me. Like, she was like, why don't we, and she was very adamant about it, why don't we highlight Indigenous authors? And to her credit too, is we've already highlighted an Indigenous author already, like we've talked about the Halfling Saga. So as a friend, I just love reading books with you, and I love talking about books, and just, like, I just love that you're so open to pushing your boundaries and limits, and I think it's, like, super commendable. So
yeah. So
with
that
books.
With that makes me super uncomfortable because I don't take compliments well. Jared, what bookstore do you have for us?
Well, you got complimented for the world to see, because this shit's going on Spotify and YouTube, girl. So I went to this bookstore recently, and I got a lot of, like, what is the word? Oh my God, deja vu. Like, I was like, God, have I been here? Because for people who don't know, we've talked about this a few times. We live in Austin, right? So Austin, Texas, woohoo! And I've lived here since 2018, so, like, 6 years.
Sure, at the same time.
It's crazy.
I've been here since 2018.
I didn't know that. Yeah, I moved here in 2018.
I didn't know that either. Yeah,
that's so weird.
That's so weird.
But before, I was like this little gay boy living. Oh, we talked about people saying gay boy, but it makes sense when you say it out loud, not in your head.
Yes, not in your head. Don't constantly.
If you don't know what we're talking about, listen to our previous episode, because now I keep talking about being gay, and it's like, Anyway, so I'll say it again. being a little like a younger gay person, when I was in my early 20s, I would constantly come and visit my friends in Austin, and I loved coming to Austin. And when I came to Austin in sometime between like, you know, like before I moved here, I went to a bookstore called Malvern Books, and it's like by UT, like north of campus. So
Okay.
anyway, cut to like a couple weeks ago, I saw like some Instagram ad, and then like it was like a suggested page, and it was this bookstore. So I went, and when I got there, I was like, I feel like I've been here, but long story longer, it's called Alienated Majesty Books, and it's right north of the campus, and it used to be Malvern Books. So like from
Okay.
2013 to 2022 was Malvern Books. I had been there. It obviously looked different, was under different ownership. And then now when I went to go get like some like free Palestine stickers, and I was like,
Yeah.
well, maybe they'll have some books. And then I was like, God, this looks so familiar.
So
Um,
familiar.
yeah, and I'm like, yes, I've been there, but it was a different owner. But Alienated Majesty Books, they are woman owned, so we love
Mm.
shouting out supporting women. It's for those of you that live in Austin, it's on West 29th Street. It's open 10 to 7 on weekdays and 10 to 8 on weekends. And they've the new ownership for Alienated Majesty Books has only been since 2023, so like last year. They don't even think they've owned it a year yet. Maybe a
Oh,
year.
okay.
So like August 23. Yeah, that's a year. Math. But anyway, so their main focus is like stocking like small presses and like comics and then works in translation. And they have a lot of like obscure, kind of like we talked about, like not specific to fantasy. So we're fantasy lovers. But if you're a fantasy reader and you want to kind of like branch out and try books that are maybe not as popular, like you're not going to see a ton of, it's going to give you a very different vibe than Barnes and Noble, right? Like, and we love Barnes and Noble,
Yeah.
but you're going to find things there that you're not going to find in other places. And it's kind of like their whole point is like growing Austin's literary landscape. So big
Love that.
fan. They're super kind of kind of like our girl Anequs in this story. They're super pro everything and very non-judgmental. They have events there, but yeah, I went there recently. The people were very helpful. Really liked it. We'll be visiting probably for. They have some fantasy for anything that you just want to look at that's kind of outside your norm. It's a good place to stop. So, and it's woman owned. So
Awesome. Love it. Love
yeah.
it. All right. So to wrap us up for the day, the final thing I wanted to discuss is our December theme. So for December,
Mistress
after
of
that,
Lies.
Mistress of Lies by M.K. Knight or M.E. Knight. Sorry, my
KMN
K.M.
right.
Knight. And right. Sorry,
KMN right.
my
I have the cover
yeah,
because I just started reading
yeah.
it.
We have the special
So
editions.
from Illuma Crate.
So yeah, yeah. Ooh. And then we're going to read Kiss of Iron by Claire Sager, which is a book I read this year and loved. And then we're going to read Strange and Stubborn Endurance by Foz Meadows, which is like Jared's favorite.
No, it's not my favorite, but it's really high up there. I can't wait. Oh
Yeah.
my God, I'm so excited.
So yeah, we're like hopefully next month is just gonna be all hits for us. We're really excited about it. But yeah, we can't wait to do our wrap up of 2024 and look in for 2025 and January when we have some other really great stuff. But thank y'all so much for being here and join us again next time where we talk about the games gods play.
Yay! See ya.
Yay! Bye.
Bye.